I know that this community is filled with big dreamers who have big plans for 2020. And here's the deal. In order for us to achieve those big plans, it's definitely going to require us to grow in the process. And I know from firsthand experience that the resistance that comes along with leveling up can feel super uncomfortable. But I've also learned that the fastest way through the discomfort isn't to run from it, it's to lean fully in. I can hardly believe we are at the end of 2019, our final episode, and I thought this would be a good chance to just share something that I've been thinking a lot about, especially as I go into a new year. And I had this realization that I think is super funny. I think this will be a really good test to see if we could be friends in real life. If you think my sense of humor is funny and you find this amusing, then I think you're really you and I can hang. But I was thinking a little bit about this whole concept of growth. And I mean, this is nothing new. We know that as we're taking on new things and new challenges, that comes along with resistance. And resistance can feel freaking uncomfortable. And for a long time, pre-Powerhouse Women, I was very good at doing just enough, working just up to the point of resistance, and kind of stopping there, not being willing to lean full on in and actually go through what was necessary in order to grow, in order to learn what I needed to learn to take things to the next level. And that was it was just as uncomfortable to live that way because, it's like that discomfort, that dull discomfort of not really fulfilling your full potential. But in a way, the discomfort felt comfortable. I knew what it felt like to be just slightly uncomfortable, but the discomfort of leaning into what scared me or into whatever that resistance was that I was facing, and it changes with every new lesson that we learn, but that discomfort scared me because I didn't know it. It almost felt more uncomfortable, but now looking back, I realized that both were just as uncomfortable. It was a matter of which discomfort had a potential reward on the other side. So, okay, now I'm going to let you in on this analogy that recently I was talking to my husband and this popped into my mind. So if you think this is just as amusing as I did, we could be friends. So I was talking to him and I go, you know what? This is just like when I used to be obsessed with Super Mario Brothers. If you were like a child of the 90s and you played old school Nintendo, you probably remember that in Super Mario, you were like the little guy, you went through the levels, and then at the end of every level, there was like this castle that inevitably you had to go through, and fireballs were thrown at you and whatever came along with that level. But ultimately, the goal was to slay the dragon. And once you killed the dragon, then you got to move to the next level. And I was like, isn't that just like life? That, we want to move on to these next levels in our business, in our life. And ultimately, there's usually a lesson we need to learn or some kind of resistance we need to go through and some kind of dragon, quote unquote, that we need to kill, we need to overcome before we can truly move on to the next level. You can't just keep running around the castle and running in circles and doing the same things. You have to eventually go into the castle, face the dragon, and that's how you move on. And he looked at me like I was kind of crazy / brilliant. So I think he really liked that analogy, but it made me think about how I approached growth and wanting to get to the next level in the wrong way for so many years. I was waiting for the dragon to just become this. I don't know what I was doing. I was maybe waiting for the dragon to become this elderly dragon that was a lot easier to kill. So instead I would be the person who would just circle the castle, and now I'm not talking about actually in Super Mario. This is the analogy for my life. I would do the things that I already knew to do. I would continue to do the same things, expecting new results, and ultimately just get really frustrated. What I would avoid is doing the thing that brought the most resistance, whether it was, a big one for me for a long time was really looking at this tendency that I had to want to please other people or avoid disappointing them. And so I operated like that, and I just kept doing the same thing, but expected a new result. I expected if I just worked harder, or if I just, did the right actions without having to overcome the resistance that I felt, that I would ultimately get to move on to the next level. But it was sort of like, if Mario just ran around and never went into the castle to actually face the dragon. It wasn't ever until I started to face the things that were getting in my way and the true discomfort that anything started to move forward in my life. So again, you might think that this is total nonsense, and that's fine. You could just move on to the next episode. But I think there's some of you that really get what I'm saying here. And you probably know what dragon is standing in your way in order for you to move forward in creating the kind of life you want, the kind of business that you want. And oftentimes it's nothing new, because it's the same thing we've been circling around and around and wanting other circumstances to change so that we don't have to just lean into the resistance. But in my experience, nothing changes until we change. Nothing changes until we're willing to lean fully in to whatever it is that we're resisting, to whatever that next discomfort is. And that here's what I wish I would have really realized, that it's actually the fastest way through. That if I turn and I run and I try to, maybe if I just learn a little bit more, maybe if I just grow and I become a smarter person or more personally developed, maybe then the resistance won't feel as bad. I was like running away from the resistance, trying to outrun it that way, instead of just turning and running into it, running into the castle, guns blazing. Or I guess, what did Mario have? He didn't have a gun. He had fireballs? I think he had fireballs. You get what I'm saying. But instead of just turning and running toward it and facing it head on, knowing that that is actually the fastest way through resistance, but also the fastest way to creating whatever result I was looking for on the other side. So just something light and fun to wrap up this year, but also something that I think is a question we should always be asking ourselves is, what is the next level of growth? Where do we need to do new actions in order to get new results? And sometimes those actions are taking a good look at the resistance that we haven't been willing to face, the dragon that we haven't been willing to face, and being honest about what it's going to take to face that and leave. It's like ultimately leave good for great, because that's the journey that we're all on. We're here on this planet to grow and to make an impact. But the only way that we do that is through the resistance, not by running from it. So I want to make sure as we head into a new year that you are plugged into the Facebook community. We are going to be really spending some intentional time in that community in the next year, cultivating conversations like this. We want to know what you think, what you're struggling with, and ultimately we want you to know that whatever resistance it is that you are facing, you are so not alone. So make sure once you finish listening to this episode, hop over to Facebook. I actually put a direct link to the Facebook group right in the show notes so that you can request to join, and make sure you're plugged in, because the other thing I've learned about resistance is that it is always easier to deal with the discomfort that comes along with resistance if we're doing it as a community. And you know what we say, you're not meant to do business or life alone. And that is especially true when you are playing Super Mario Brothers, either in real life or in a philosophical sense, and you are up against the next thing that you need to overcome in order to make the difference that you know you're meant to make.